Okay. I'm not that old. I don't remember. I was around, but I wasn't around I wasn't tall enough to play Computer Space from 1971, and there weren't a ton of these made. And if you go on eBay, actually, they sell for quite a bit. Every once in a while, I see the case for one, like the enclosure. Very rarely you'll have one intact. It's more of a museum piece now than anything else, of course. But it was really groovy when it came out in 1971. And you can see on the far right all the huge boards there, and that all had to be hardwired and manually, put together. There was no like mass production in terms of, there was some, but it wasn't like, there were a lot of people that had to assemble this thing. Okay, and this was created by Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari, back in 1971. And I just happen to have the audio track for this, a little video capture. And I want you to listen to what this sounds like. It's one sound channel, okay? But it's kind of a special case because they somehow finagled noise and tones all on this one logical channel, which is really ahead of its time. Everything had direct connections to the, to the an IC, a chip, and they just figured out how to do this. And I have no idea how they did it in terms of engineering, but it worked. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hope that this plays. I'm going to put the volume down. Since I see Alexis, she can give me a nod if she hears something. Yes. Okay. So I'll start from the beginning. Really hard to see. I'll use my mouse pointer here to show you where the shifts are and the target you're trying to hit. And the sound you're going to hear is the kind of like the shift engine noise. Here we go. All right, this is you. Here are your enemies. It's kind of like a Vector asteroids type of ship. There's the you. Little bullets. Right. So a very unique, special case kind of deal is really the first video game, at least that I know of, that had sound, and one of the first video games, period. There was one at MIT called, I think it was called Space War, something along those lines, back in the late 50s, perhaps. But that was like more of an internal thing, and not a commercially available product. But this was really ahead of its time. Okay, but it wasn't until a year later when Pong arrived, complete with audio. And let's count how many sound effects here. We have a grand total of how many? Interesting. 2. That's right. You got to start somewhere, right? A total of 2 sound effects, a beep and a boop. We've got one tone high and one tone low, and that's it. And that was pretty amazing to have playing through a computer screen, basically a TV screen, and people went nuts. They couldn't believe it. It became a huge hit. Okay. Other consoles started to appear, and or home consoles, I should say, and Magnavox was one of the first ones. They did not have sound, and this is why you've never heard of the Odyssey, unless you were a video game history buff. It didn't have sound. The CEO said, we don't need sound, and that was a big mistake, and it did poorly when it came out. Okay, but Pong did find its way into the home in 1975. Yes, I remember my wife actually had Pong growing up back in 1970. I think she got it in like 76 or 77. And I had the Telstar version from Coleco, same thing. But you had the 2 tones, the beep and the boop, and that was more than enough, those 2 tones. And it was like you could just play for hours, and because it seemed like such a novel thing at the time, right? And for most of the 70s, you didn't get home entertainment. It was all in the arcade, and arcades weren't that big because there weren't a lot of machines. There were like pinball machines and stuff, but that didn't have much sound. In terms of video games, there wasn't a lot, but they kind of eked out over a few years. You can read, this is really small print, and I don't expect you to keep up with this now. You can digest this later, but I'm going to show you 4 of them. One was Gunfight in 75, Night Driver in 1976, Space Invaders, which was huge in 1978, and Galaxian in '79. I don't know if anyone's watching the High Score or has watched the High Score Netflix series, but they talk about in the first episode about Space Invaders and how incredibly huge a hit it was, especially in Japan. And they had actually found a designer and interviewed this person, and it's pretty interesting. Anyway, Space Invaders had two sounds, two logical channels or two sounds, and one kind of quote unquote music piece, which is just rocking back and forth like the Jaws theme, dun 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 kind of thing. So here we go. This is what it sounded like in 1975. This is Gunfight. All right, one channel with variable sounds. Here's Night Drive. This had two channels also with variable sounds. So you can hear that disparate sound. It's like a dissonant skidding sound. That's two tones together, making that kind of dissonance. This is a good use of two channels. Notice the flying saucer sound. Stop here. The flying saucer sound, when it came in, you didn't hear the marching or the laser or the bullets from the turret anymore, from the player turret, because there's only those two channels that can be used at any one time. All right, so you have to constantly steal those channels from some other source, or what has more priority. In this case, the flying saucer is the highest priority. And this is incredible for its time. All right, so there are three channels there, and something called a variable tone generator. I won't ask you on a test what a variable tone generator is, but it's just basically the ability to have a score, a musical score, not just like in Gunfight with a single melody, but to actually have, you know, harmony and all this stuff. It's very very far ahead of its time. Okay. Then in '77, the whole market went nuts when the 2600 came out, the Atari 2600, and this also had two channels. You had a choice of tone or noise, so you could have two musical tones. You could have one tone and just a little bit of noise. And by noise, I mean I'll define what noise is in our third lecture on how analog audio works. But for now, you can just know that noise is that sound that you hear like fuzz. Okay, you could have that for both channels as well. So I want you to listen to, and this is where we're going to start training our ears. I want you to listen to how cleverly the various game designers working on Atari cartridges in the '70s made use of these two channels. Now remember, there's only two. You can't cheat and have three. So let's hear what that sounds like. This is about three minutes. But I want you to just take a good listen, and I will try to keep quiet. Here we go. That is not a duck. That's a dragon. Okay, so I think that's enough for now. You get the idea. Two channels that are used as cleverly as possible to achieve this effect that there's a lot more going on than there actually is in terms of the sound around you, right? And again, this was incredibly novel for its time, so it just seemed so amazing that this could even be a possibility. No one was thinking about in terms of players. No one was really picking the audio apart. They were just thankful it was there, And it was a really exciting time because you had such incredible constraints on the what you could create for a game in terms of game design too. I mean, you may have had 4K or at most 8K to create these games in basically assembly language and hope for the best, right? It wasn't a lot to work with. Anyway, in 1979, Mattel launched Intellivision, which is actually being relaunched right now by Tommy Tallarico, and there's some pre-orders going in, and they've modernized it, which is a cool thing. But anyway, it came out in 1979, and it was the very first home console system to have 3 channels of audio and a speech processor. Here's an example. It was pretty bad. Even then, I think this was pretty bad, but it was novel for a brief time. Here's a baseball game from television, and you're going to hear the umpire say, "You're out." I have to tell you that because you may not understand what he's saying. So, saying "You're out." Here we go. That's it. So it's more of a sing-songy thing to help you understand he's saying "You're out" than actual pure speech. I put speech in quotes there. It should be in like triple quotes. Okay.